the amazing things that the earthworm does. Charles Darwin said that if you go out and look out on a broad expanse, that was leveled and created by the earthworm, who over the eons have eaten probably every particle out there in most of the topsoils of the world, processed it, brought it up, put it on the top, went down to the subsoil and got minerals and renewed the mineral content in the surface layer of the topsoil, as well as the humus content in the surface layer. Charles Darwin spent most of his life studying the worm, and you all know he wrote Origin of the Species, which totally changed Western thinking, totally changed it. So Origin of the Species was an important book, but Charles Darwin said that his book, which I have trouble remembering the full name, Vegetable Formation by the Action of Earthworms, was the most important book he wrote. It was more important than Origin of the Species. Why? Because by vegetable mold he meant topsoil. And where are we and practically anything else without topsoil? We're absolutely dependent on it. So is practically everything else unless it lives in the ocean, and even then it's dependent on what washes into the ocean. And it all goes in a circle, of course. It comes up as volcanoes or whatever, but in deltas. I could talk again. Well, let me say a few things about the earthworm. The earthworm has an incredible digestive system. If you feed a chicken or a cow, about 10% of what you feed it in food value winds up in the meat, in the eggs, in the milk. You feed a worm what he wants, and it's the other way around. The cow and the chicken excrete about 90% of the food value, leaves them. Okay, that's food for recycling and so forth. So is worm manure, but the worm assimilates and uses 90% and excretes 10%. So it's just the opposite. Incredibly efficient digestion. And the thing about it is under the right circumstances, those worm castings are incredibly rich, both in minerals and in humus, and an incredible fertilizer. Not that you use them 100% to grow things in, although in theory, according to Charles and Dr. Barrett, the topsoil is basically worm castings or soil processed by worms in addition to organic matter that they take in. And you can tell worm castings because the worm cannot take anything in larger than 2 millimeters, which is like 1/8 of an inch or something, or smaller, a 1/16 maybe. And consequently, what it poops out is no bigger than 2 millimeters. So if you're looking at what's being called worm castings, and there's stuff in there greater than 2 millimeters, that part is not worm castings. That's not worm poop. Okay. Darwin said that annually earthworms deposit 25 tons of new topsoil annually. He was way under, way too conservative. They've been shown to deposit, I've lost the number, but far more than that, at least in favorite situations, good environments. And the worm's intestinal system is kind of like a miniature composting chamber. And the kind of the miracle about it is you make compost. It'll take you weeks at least, months, maybe years, to turn that compost into what can be called humus. And the worm does it overnight. He eats a volume equivalent to about his own weight. And out it comes, this intermixture of minerals and organic matter turned into humus, enriched with bacteria from its own intestines, and containing certain kinds of juices and so forth that it secretes, calcium from its gizzard, and bacteria. All of that is in the worm castings, which come out as an ideal size particle or crumb that makes for perfect tilth and working the soil. And it's just, you've all read these figures, I'm sure, of how the worm poops out a casting that is so much richer than the soil around it. It's like 7 times the nitrogen, 5 times the phosphorus, 12 times the potassium, 1.5 times the calcium. Magnesium stays about the same. And of course it's full of trace minerals because the worm is eating these tiny particles of minerals and mixing them with the humus in its gizzard, and it's grinding all of this stuff and intermixing it so that when it comes out, it's a perfect plant food. Extremely highly soluble, immediately available food. Okay? So you could go on and on and on and on about this. And so then, talking about the worm castings themselves, amazing, marvelous stuff. And I can't remember it all. I can't tell it all to you. But one of the interesting things about it is, you know, here's the basic ingredients that are involved. And I have a leaflet here on making compost by the SPAM method. So the similarities and the correlations. The SPAM formula for compost making involves using soil, plant, and animal matter plus minerals. And one of the things that Barrett really didn't do was add minerals other than lime. I'm not even sure he used lime, but others did, and they're in his book, this book here, Harnessing the Earthworm by Dr. Thomas Barrett. And for those of you who want to get it, it's a beautiful, really well-written book considering that it came out in the 40s. I can order it for you. Won't charge you any profit. $10. Let me know. I'll put it on the list here, and we'll order them. Where was I? Anyway,